I wish I could recall what it was that drew me to that location. I've spent many restless hours going back to the beginning to find that the beginning made as little sense to me as it would a lump of coal. The mist that crosses the barren wasteland that is my mind will not lift. The veil remains forever there, taunting me with its mystery. No matter how I try, the only conclusions I reach are migraines at the edge of blackness that only the bitter sting of whiskey seems to abate. Perhaps it is best that I have forgotten how the tale begins. Now, if only I knew a method to forget how it ends. I remember the awakening. I used the term awakening lightly as I was conscious through the entire ordeal. I know this because my mind knows this. As much as the mist works to blur the realities of my experience, it does eventually clear. At the edge of the mist came something worse. The wind. Like 1,000 screaming banshees, it lashed at me angrily, doling out some cruel punishment for unimaginable crimes that I did not recall committing. It thrashed at my body, carrying tiny daggers that poked and prodded and stung my eyes. I screamed a silent scream and begged for the maelstrom to stop. I asked forgiveness for whatever it was that had deemed it necessary for me to suffer so. The gods, it seemed, were not listening. And I prayed to the wrong one. Buddha, Allah, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Zeus, by whichever name you bear, please release me from this purgatory that racks my soul. Then, as it began, it ceased. The banshees fled, taking their stinging blades with them. The demons and devils were exorcised from within me, it seemed. My eyes, still glazed with remnants of the maelstrom, blurred the world around me. My fingers worked feverishly, firmly kneading my eyelids. My eyes watered and blinked uncontrollably, working, straining, fighting to gain focus. Magnificent blue and sparkling gold hues assaulted me through the tears. I was not torn from the world to suffer in limbo below the earth in the depths of hell. In retrospect, it may have been a more favorable outcome, but I digress. The blue, a sky. The gold, a desert. My heart sank as I looked to the left to see nothing but the golden sands as far as the eye can see. To the right, the same. Ahead, behind, all the same. A strange weakness assaulted my knees, causing me to nearly topple over. A terrible rising tingle crept up my spine, twisted through my innards, and set the hairs on the back of my neck to standing. One can never complain of loneliness until they are truly alone. That is what I believed anyway. At first I ran. Panic had tapped my shoulder and taken the reins, pushing me harder and harder, reaching nowhere. My mind, or at least the shred of sanity that battered and assaulted me, eventually took control and steadied my pace. It spoke soothingly and rationally of the importance of maintaining a semblance of calamity. It fought viciously against the onslaught of my insane mind, which screamed and thrashed against all logic. A war was waged within the darkest corners of my psyche. My body was merely an unwitting vessel, a battleground. Nausea, vertigo. I descended to my knees, only half sensing that my body was shaking. An arctic blast assaulted me, wrapping icy fingers around my neck. Fear. For all the things in the world that end in disappointment, true fear lives up to its reputation every time. My breath entered heavily and exited rapidly. The thrumming of my heart rocked my body ever so gently, reminding me of my mortality. Yes, I was alive. That had to count for something, didn't it? I lifted one knee and planted my foot firmly in the sand. A faint puff of dust erupted below my heel. Half the battle had been won. I pressed my palms into the warm sand and pushed myself upward. A feral snarl reverberated at the base of my throat as I rose, challenging any to step forward and stop my ascent. Courage. Liberation. As if on cue, the sky snarled back. The thunderclap shook the earth and rumbled through my chest. The blue darkened rapidly, hurtling through the spectrum, until finally transitioning to the blackest of black. Wetness splattered on my forehead. I tilted my head upward as another drop slapped my cheek. Then another, and another. Soon the sky opened in all its rage, the darkness only coming clear through the intensity of the electrical symphony above as the lightning danced playfully in the clouds. As symbolic as the opening as the skies was, it was the other opening that tore through my very soul, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. Weak and powerless. Utterly hopeless. A flicker at first. A trick of light, perhaps. No, certainly not. Another movement caught my eye, more obvious this time. I leaned forward, cupping my hands over my brow to shield my eyes from the downpour. A black circle lay a dozen feet in front of me. It grew and grew until finally I could discern what was happening. The edges of the circle tumbled inward. Sand trickled into the void. The earth was opening before me. I so desperately wanted to turn and flee, but was held firmly in place. I could not move. I could not look away. A hand came forth from the void, and then another. The long, slender fingers curled and clutched at the edges of the void, straining to gain purchase. Sinew bulged from the back of the hands as something began to rise between them. Lightning erupted nearby, ominously unveiling the mystery. The eyes. In my entire life, I had never seen true anger. Not until that very moment. They were there, below us, all along. We lived and loved and built our homes above, while below they toiled and waited. What once was below shall rise above. I don't recall what drew me to that location, or how I ever got back. It was when the holes began appearing everywhere that I wished it were all but a nightmare. It was a nightmare.